So to get us started, let me tell you a little bit about Jeff. Jeff brings over 30 years of experience as an industry leader, management executive, and trusted advisor to executive level clients across a broad range of industries. He is an accomplished business strategist whose professional focus includes reputation risk assessment and management, key account management, political polling, sales and marketing strategy, as well as the development and leverage of customer advisory boards. Jeff brings to Naxion his portfolio of stakeholder advisory services, a consulting perspective and enterprise toolkit framed around the critical importance of reputational excellence. His voice of the stakeholder work helps executive teams better define and effectively monitor all the internal and external stakeholder experiences that comprise reputational excellence and to prioritize strategic imperatives that position corporations for resilience and growth. Jeff plays a dual role at Naxion, providing corporate consulting support to clients in need of stakeholder assessment programs, while also ensuring that the firm is effectively resourced and organized to optimize the returns on its innovation and technology strategy. Previously, Jeff served as the president of Opinion Research Corporation's U.S. group and was a member of the global executive team with responsibilities for global marketing, strategy development, and overall growth of the corporate brand. As part of these efforts, Jeff spearheaded the initiation and publication of the New York Stock Exchange's Global CEO Report and led the CNN and ORC poll for over 7 years. Jeff served on the board of directors for, is it CASRO or CASRO? We say it?
CASRO is good.
CASRO, thank you. Now the Insights Association from 2010 to 2014 and was the 2012 board chair. He is a frequent speaker and author. Jeff received a master's degree from Western Michigan University with a focus in applied research design and educational evaluation. He earned his BA from the Pennsylvania State University with a focus in psychology and statistics. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Sure, I'm looking forward to it.
All right, the floor is yours.
Okay. So what I was asked to do tonight is really, I think, talk less about market research as a career, although I'll just give you a very brief introduction to that. More about how I got where I am and sort of the stages that I went through in my career and some of the unique twists and turns that it took, and hopefully get across to all of you that life can't be planned and you just have to be open to opportunities as they come up. So let me give you just a very basic understanding of international market research. I have worked all over the world and have done so for the better part of 30 years. But market research is actually pretty simple. It's the what I refer to as the science of why, how, and what. So what we try to do is understand why people make the decisions they do, both business individuals as well as consumers. Why they buy what they buy. So issues around brand and issues around the impact of social media and things of that nature. What businesses need to understand to be successful. So a lot of time that I spend is actually helping business executives frame their business problems in a way that can be researched and then used to make the decisions they ultimately have to make. And when you do all of this, what you learn is that a lot of the tools have changed over the years. We've gotten much more sophisticated in our ability to assess both conscious as well as non-conscious measurement of our audiences. But at the end of the day, the ultimate goal is the same. That is to help our clients make better business choices because they're doing it on an informed base of information, and that's what market research is really all about. It's a pretty unique industry. Generally, we talk about people working on either the supplier side of the business that I've been on my entire career, or the client side of the business. I'm on the supplier side, both at Opinion Research Corporation, my own business for 7 years, and now at Naxion. uh, because I get bored easily. And so, as a consultant, you're working on multiple projects at once, and you're not pigeonholed into a certain um, area. And it's something that I have found much more rewarding for my own personal uh, purposes. So that's just a very small snippet about market research. And as I've told Katie, for those of you who may be more interested in learning more about details of market research or have specific questions about market research, happy to do follow-ups post this seminar. So that's not an issue at all. But what I thought I'd cover tonight is this would be probably a little less traditional than perhaps some of your presentations. I think, now that I'm well into my career, closer to the end than the beginning, you start to see how things fit together in ways that you never anticipated they would. So I thought talking about some of that and some of the life experiences I had and how that informed some of the things some of the choices that I made and some of the things I was able to do might be beneficial to those of you who are just starting out. Because I know at this point in your career, you're very focused on making certain you make the right steps and you do the right things and you have the right experiences. And I don't want to diminish all that. All that's really important. But I think when people become so focused, they can close off opportunities that they really shouldn't close off. So I thought, though, that I'd also just tell you a little bit about my Penn State career because it goes back a ways, but it's always interesting to know what it was like for somebody else. I was on the main campus for all 4 years. It was great. I worked my way through school. I needed to do that. I worked in the dining halls. I was the holiday prime rib carver with my girlfriend at the time at the hub, which was always just a great thing. And back when it was still done, when students still drove the campus loop, I was one of the campus loop drivers, which was one of the ultimate power jobs on campus. Um, I did graduate from the liberal arts honors program with a focus in experimental research. At the time that I went to school, there were no formal market research degrees. And I was caught between the computer science department and the statistics department, two areas that I had a great extent of interest in. The computer science department would not let me take the statistics courses that I wanted to take, and the statistics department, the math department wouldn't let me take the computer science courses I wanted to take. So I had a conversation with the dean of liberal arts, and he said, "Well, we can certainly craft something you're interested in." And that's how I ended up in liberal arts. So point number one is, I'm sure all of you are probably a little bit further in your education, but um, never assume no is the answer. It may just be you haven't looked hard enough for a way to achieve something you want to achieve, but that's really an important point. Once I graduated with a good deal of debt. I'm sure that's pretty common for a lot of students. I wanted to go to graduate school, and the only way I could do it was on a funded assistantship. So I found one out in Kalamazoo, Michigan. At the time, I thought that was a city that didn't really exist, but I quickly learned that it did, and got a degree in educational leadership, which actually allowed me to extend my computer science and statistics skills in the area of educational measurement. And that was really, for me, it was a good experience. It paid for my master's degree. I had a really good experience from an assistantship perspective where I had to work with people that were much older than I was. It was a training assistantship, so I trained people in statistical methods and how to measure educational programs, the success or failure thereof. And so most of the people at the time that I was working with was in their 40s, their 50s, or sometimes even older. And it became a very important learning experience for me that served me very well in later jobs as I needed to manage up in terms of how to actually work with people that are significantly older than you are. The first job I had, uh, so I did my master's degree. First job I had was actually in the Michigan area. It was a small educational evaluation firm which used disciplines of research, everything that I had learned, statistical analysis, how do you write a questionnaire, how do you do a face-to-face, in-depth interview with somebody and extract the information you want to get from that individual. Took that job in southeastern Michigan in the town of Royal Oak, right near Detroit. Um, did that for about 5 years. Um, I took that job because it was a small company and I had the chance to literally do everything. And that's, again, an important point. Um, I think large companies have great opportunities as well. They've got phenomenal training programs, great educational benefits, all sorts of things. But I wanted to get my hands as dirty as possible. And I wanted the chance to really learn things on my own with one or two mentors, and that was the exact circumstances of the company that I worked for, which was called IDEA, Instructional Development and Evaluation Associates at the time. I did that until I had um, uh, a frustrating experience. So again, what an educational evaluator does, which is where I started my career, is you take a look at federally or state funded educational programs, and you are asked to determine whether or not that program was successful and if it deserves additional funding, or if you need to identify significant fixes in a program before they can get additional functions. So that's the role of an educational evaluator. The frustrating point that I ran into is we were doing some just phenomenal work in for schools in inner city Detroit. Uh, and the program that I was working with some really innovative younger teachers on was how, in fact, you keep unwed mothers in inner city Detroit in school to graduate and then get jobs. So the program that had been developed was all about an alliance between local businesses and students, and not just the mothers, but also the fathers and the grandparents. And we had actually proven that the program was so successful that the students coming out of that program were actually graduating at higher rates and getting better jobs than students that were not in that program. Now, again, we're talking about pregnant young women in an inner city Detroit. We're talking about 12, 13, 14 year olds, just to put it in perspective. So we had them in the program for generally 4 or 5 years. We're very proud of what we had done. The state was ready to fund some additional work. Went to a board of education meeting. A parent stood up and said, "We think this is promoting promiscuity in our youth." And the program was gone the next day. To me, that said, well, why am I doing all this? If you can't have impact, um, then perhaps I should look at something else. Didn't know what I wanted to do next. So my first departure from the traditional is, rather than looking for another job, I could have gone to work for one of the auto companies in Detroit, doing market research. I could have done other things. But I decided instead to become a scuba instructor on the world's largest trimaran down in the British Virgin Islands. I did that for a year. My job was to help people, generally wealthy people, have a great time and teach them how to scuba dive in an exotic location. Really was not a bad gig at all. Um, but again, I did that because I was frustrated with what I had experienced, not knowing what that experience would actually do for me. So what happened when that door opened and I walked through it was that not only were the families that tended to come on this trimaran, which again it was 100 feet long, 60 feet wide, largest trimaran in the world at the time. There's now a larger one. Um, but the people that came on, they were very successful individuals. And so what I spent my year there doing is asking the question, how did you get where you're going? And what tip would you give somebody who's young in their career? Two questions I asked every guest. And these included at the time, for example, the president of ABC Television was a guest on the boat. So people of the very wealthy families, there was a family that had been very successful in the wine export business from Paris. So just a host of very, very interesting families. And I got two extremely consistent answers. One was that life is 80% luck and 20% not being afraid to take advantage of the luck when it happens. That was very good. And the other more important piece of advice, which is almost how I was going to title this particular presentation to you, was don't be afraid to walk through a door when it opens. And if you take nothing out of my comments tonight, it would be recognize that you're going to have lots of doors open to you as you go through your career, some quite unexpected. And you need to be able to go through those doors, walk through those doors with confidence. Realize that particularly in the early part of your career, there's very little you can do to yourself that's going to be long-term damage. It's just not going to happen. There's always time to recover from a bad decision. But I think, one of the things I would really encourage people to do is take a little bit of risk at this point in your career. So I spent the year in the Caribbean. My parents lived in the Philadelphia area. I was, or so I thought, on my way to California, which I thought was really the best place to live. Um, Never made it there. I was reading the Sunday Philadelphia Inquirer one day. There was an ad for a job for this company called Opinion Research Corporation. I read the ad, said, well, none of these terms are familiar, but it sounds like something I could do. So I gave the company a call and said, look, I'm in the area for at least another week. Do you want to talk to me? They said yes. Um, and I was there for almost 29 years after that. But one of the questions that people ask, and it's a legitimate question to ask, is why did you stay at one company so long? It's generally frowned upon as not good career advice. But I can actually say that while the name of the company was the same for 29 years, the company itself and what I did there was radically different over that time period. So let me walk you through some of the things that happened, and you'll start to understand how some of this fits together. So um, the company, again, at the time, Opinion Research Corporation was an $11 million a year company, losing $1 million a year. The only reason we stayed in business is because our owner, Arthur D. Little, a consulting firm that doesn't even exist in the US anymore, only in the UK, kept sending us money whenever we needed it. It was a great arrangement. We'd say we ran out of money, can't make payroll, send us some money. They always did. But they took themselves private, and as part of the agreement to take themselves private, they had to divest of any non-core businesses. Market research, which is what Opinion Research Corporation did, was categorized as a non-core business by the banks. So a group of us got together, 8 of us to be exact, and decided that we should try to buy the company. We, in fact, bought the company at a very favorable price because no one else wanted it because it was losing money and pretty small. So we bought it, and we really did risk a lot. We had to sign personal guarantees for the bank loans and all sorts of things. But in 1993, 3 years later, we actually took it public at a time when you could still take what was then a $35 million company, when you could take a company that small public. And over the course of the next 13 years, built it into a $200 million company. And I had various roles throughout that, first as the director of the financial services practice, which I created. Um, then I ran the US for a while for ORC, about 5-6 years. And then around 2000, I had an idea. One of my good clients, even to this day, is Moody's Investor Service. And we had talked about would it be possible to take all the things that you read in a traditional equity research report? So if you go to a Goldman Sachs or a Morgan Stanley or a company like that, and you ask for a write-up on company X, they will give you a write-up that talks about the strength of management, talks about the financial results, talks about the long-term view of the company, so on and so forth. And we thought we could quantify that as opposed to having it just be qualitative in nature. So we developed a research approach to do that. We got $2 million of funding to actually try that. We did it for 3 years. It was a media sensation, but we couldn't commercialize to the extent that warranted further investment. So I came back then to the US. I ran that again for some time. And then in 2006, because we were a public company, we had a offer from a buyer that we couldn't refuse because it was twice our current stock price. And that launched me into another stage of my career, which was working in a company, then Info USA was the name of the company. And what we tried to do is create a one-stop shop approach to marketing, database analytics, and market research. Combine all those things to help companies be more successful at gaining customers. That was, again, we applied the principles of market research to that. I was involved with the strategy of setting up that business. It worked. It worked well. We got that set up. And then I was asked to find ways to really extend the brand of the company. That led to conversations with CNN about being part of the CNN ORC poll, which we originally named it. That came around only because I was very interested in politics. I'm a political junkie by nature. And just made a random call down to CNN one day, happened to talk to the guy that was in charge of their polls and said, we'll try doing this stuff for you for free. If the opportunity ever comes up, give us a call. Turned out they weren't happy with the firm that was currently doing their polling, which at the time was Gallup. And that started a 7-year run of managing that CNN ORC poll, really having a good time doing that. But again, door opened, not something I anticipated doing. Never really thought about political polling, but it ended up being something that really worked very, very well. We then ultimately, because the chairman of the company ended up running into some problems with the SEC, the board of directors decided maybe it was time to sell the company again. They sold it to a private equity firm, not a great experience. You'll find that if you're trying as a group of managers to build a global brand for a company, that a long-term perspective is generally not in alignment with what a private equity firm is looking to do. So we were not happy with the people that owned us. Again, group of us got together, talked to the private equity firm and said, if we can get another private equity firm to take you out, would you allow us to do that? They said yes. We found a different private equity firm. Started the whole process again. That's when I became global managing director for strategy, marketing, and business development. So again, another twist and turn in my career. At the same time, I also got very involved with our industry trade association. That's CASRO, which Katie mentioned at the beginning of this. And CASRO accounts for over 80% of the market research expenditures in the US and about 60% worldwide. So it's a pretty powerful industry group. I had the honor of chairing that in 2012. And I got to meet anybody there was to meet in the industry. So again, opportunity came up to get on their board, eventually become board chair. Yes, it was extra work, but it really paid off in the long run. Make a long story short, we were no happier with our second private equity firm than we were with the first. I had had enough at that time. I wasn't going to make any more money out of more transactions. Got myself fired by design, and then started my own company, Stakeholder Advisory Services, which I ran for 7 years. I took all the skills that I had and I turned that business into what's essentially a very high-end customer relationship management firm where I spent time talking to the top, typically 5-10% of my clients' customers, to identify what my clients were doing well, what they were doing poorly, and then reporting to the executive teams and working with them to really sort of manage how they deal with their clients. Did that for 7 years, and then joined Naxion, where I am today as Chief Operating Officer, only because as part of the work that I did with Casro and all the board meetings, I got to know the CEO of Naxion, a woman named Susan McDonald, very well. I believe in networking, and I can really attest to the power of networking. And every 3 months, every 6 months, Susan and I would get together, have lunch, and say what's going on. Last June, so June of 2019, she and I had lunch again, and she said, "Would you ever consider working for me?" I originally said no because I was really enjoying what I was doing and very successful at it. But we kept talking for 6 months, and during that course of the 6 months, my business just grew to the point where I couldn't do it myself anymore, and I needed to find some way to bring an additional resource. Susan and I reached an agreement, and I joined Naxion. And again, door opened. I went through it. Great decision. Very happy very happy with where I'm at. So that's a short version of a very long career. And I think that's about 25 minutes, Katie, which is probably as much as people want to hear about things from me, which I think should give us plenty of time for some Q&A.
Absolutely. So for the students, I'm going to bump you all up to panelists so that we can, you don't, if you're not comfortable with it, please don't turn your camera on, but you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask Jeff direct questions. Tanya, I know you're coming in. We're asking questions of the presenter based on what he just told us, so you can join in. All right. I was having a moment of panic because as I moved them to panelists, they left attendees. I'm like, I just kicked them all out, but I didn't. Everybody's here.
Good.
Everybody's here. Jeff, as everybody thinks about their questions, could you explain how by being able, I'm guessing it was Susan Welch that you spoke with.
Yes, at the time it was Susan Welch, yeah.
Absolutely. Can you tell how that liberal arts experience then helped you to go through all those doors, that transferable skill set you received from liberal arts?
So that's actually a great question. So one of the benefits of a liberal arts degree, and one of my biggest complaints as an employer interviewing students, we have a number of Penn State grads at our company, is that students are not well-rounded. And the benefit of a liberal arts degree, I can't emphasize this enough, is you get broader base of experience. People coming out of a liberal arts degree tend to be better writers, which is a big issue when you're looking for new hires. But you tend to take a broader range of courses. My experience is that you've got a broader range of life experiences, either because of study abroad or your own travel or whatever the case may be. And we prefer that to somebody who's highly focused on a specific skill set that might give you excellence in one area, but not somebody who can interrelate well with other individuals. And that's both important internally within a company from a cultural standpoint, but also importantly from an external work with clients perspective, because our business really is all about people, whether it's the customers or whether it's internal people that are working. So I think that well-rounded degree is pretty important.
Great. I think I scared some people away with the chance of being recorded. So I'm gonna quit recording right now and allow our